Comanche Leader was left for dead, unaware. But a little girl climbed to save him. The wind had a cruel voice that evening, low and dry as it swept through the broken ridges of North Texas. The land was painted red by the sinking sun, and every shadow looked like a warning. Riding through that dying light came a Comanche warrior named Taken, his black stallion moving steady across the scrub and stone. He was tall, strong in the shoulders, and silent as the plains he rode. A carved eagle feather hung from his braid, not for vanity but remembrance. He rode with a purpose. Hidden in his saddlebag were peace tokens meant for a meeting that might stop another war before it began. The army had burned enough villages, and too many sons had been buried under the prairie grass. Taken had seen enough killing to fill 10 lifetimes. But men like Eli Boone didn't care about peace. From the high ridge above, Boone watched the lone rider through the sights of his rifle, a smirk curling his wind-burned lips. He was a bounty hunter, the kind who traded flesh for gold, and tonight the man below him was worth more than a herd of cattle. "Take him alive if you can," Boone muttered to his men. "But dead'll do just fine." Then the rifles cracked, 1, 2, 5 shots at once. The black stallion screamed and reared, blood streaking its flank. Taken threw himself from the saddle and rolled into the dust, returning fire with fierce precision. 2 of Boone's men fell before they even reached their cover. But there were too many. A bullet tore through Taken's leg, another ripped into his shoulder. His revolver clattered away empty. Still he stood tall, his chest heaving, face streaked with dirt and blood, proud even in defeat. Boone stepped out from behind a boulder, boots crunching in the grit. "Well, look what we got here," he drawled. "The wolf of the plains himself." Taken didn't answer. He just stared, a gaze that could have cut glass. Boone grinned wider. "Don't worry, Chief. The good folks at Fort Bell pay extra to see you hang. You'll make me rich before breakfast." He slammed the butt of his rifle across Taken's face. The warrior went down, blood spilling into the red dirt. By nightfall, the bounty hunters had made camp at the edge of Broken Mesa, their firelight flickering against the dark canyon walls. Taken was tied to a wagon wheel, hands bound tight behind him, body sagging under his own weight. His breath came shallow and ragged, but he made no sound. He would not give them that. Boone's men drank whiskey, laughing loud enough to wake the dead. They tossed pebbles and insults at their prisoner, calling him dog, savage, half-man. Boone poured a splash of liquor over Taken's wounds just to hear it sizzle. "Let him bake in the sun come morning," Boone said. "The army don't need him pretty." Then they staggered off to sleep, their laughter fading into the night. Up on the ridge above them, a little girl had seen everything. Sarah McCall had followed the gunfire from her family's small homestead a mile away, barefoot and curious, clutching a rusty tin cup in her hand. Her father was gone, killed months ago in a raid, and her mother lay sick in bed, too weak to speak. Sarah should have run home. But she didn't. She crouched behind a boulder, peering down through the dark, and saw the man tied to the wheel. The firelight showed the blood on his skin, the rope cutting deep into his wrists. He looked half dead already. And yet, something in his face, the stillness, the pride, made her chest tighten. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who'd been wronged. The moon slid out from behind a cloud, lighting the canyon in silver. Sarah pressed her small fingers to her lips and whispered, "If Pa were here, he'd say no man should die like that." She waited until Boone's snores grew deep and steady. Then, heart-pounding, she started down the slope. Rocks shifted under her feet, and twice she froze as one of the men rolled over near the fire. The night was heavy and close, the kind where every sound feels like a scream. When she reached the wagon, the warrior's eyes flickered open, dark and fierce, even in his weakness. He stared at her as if she were a dream. "Go," he rasped. His voice was rough, nearly gone. "Child, go." Sarah shook her head. "They'll kill you come morning." He blinked at her, bewildered. "Not your fight." "Maybe it is," she whispered. She pulled her small knife from her belt and started sawing at the ropes. The blade was dull, her hands shaking so bad she nicked her thumb, but she didn't stop. Each cut felt like forever. A rattlesnake hissed from the shadows, her breath caught, but she didn't scream. She threw a rock, missed, and kept cutting. Finally the last rope gave way. The warrior collapsed, too weak to stand. Sarah caught his head against her shoulder, her thin arms trembling under his weight. "Come on," she whispered. "We gotta go." She dragged him inch by inch toward a thicket of brush, leaving small boot prints in the sand beside the heavy drag of his body. The moon disappeared behind clouds again, hiding them from sight. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, the two of them were gone. Down in the camp, Boone awoke to the sound of the wind, and saw the ropes torn, the dust disturbed, the tracks leading away. He stood there for a long moment, face twisting with fury. "Find them," he roared. "Find the Comanche, and the brat that took him." The others scrambled for their rifles, spitting curses, mounting up. But by then, far down in the canyon shadows, a little girl and a dying warrior were already disappearing into the wilderness, the first flicker of an impossible friendship taking root under the wild Texas sky. The first light of dawn spilled weakly across the mesas, turning the red rock gold. The air still smelled of gunpowder and rain. Down in the canyon, a 10-year-old girl half-dragged, half-guided a wounded Comanche warrior through the brush, her tiny frame trembling under the effort. Taken's breath came in ragged bursts. His steps faltered, each one slower than the last. Blood darkened the cloth tied around his thigh, a makeshift bandage Sarah had torn from her dress. His strength was fading fast. When he stumbled, Sarah braced his arm around her shoulders and whispered, "Don't you quit on me now." He didn't understand every word, but he caught the tone, stubborn and fierce, like someone who'd seen too much of death already. They reached a dry streambed where cottonwoods grew thick and low. Sarah eased him down beneath the shade, wiping the sweat from his brow with her sleeve. The heat was already building, another brutal Texas day ahead. She filled her tin cup at a small trickle of muddy water and brought it to his lips. "Drink," she said softly. "It ain't much, but it's something." He hesitated, looking at her, not with trust yet, but with a flicker of disbelief. Then he drank, water running down the corners of his mouth. He muttered a word in Comanche, something low and rough, almost like a prayer. Sarah tilted her head. "What's that mean?" He coughed, tried to find the English. "Means wind still blows. Life's still here." She nodded as if she understood every bit of it. "Then we best keep it blowin'." They rested a while before the sound of horses carried faintly through the canyon. Sarah froze. Taken lifted his head weakly, listening. "They come," he murmured. Sarah's heart pounded so hard she thought the bounty hunters could hear it. She grabbed his arm, trying to lift him. "We gotta go, mister." He tried to stand, teeth gritted, but his legs nearly gave out. She pushed her shoulder under him again, a little girl bearing the weight of a dying man, and together they hobbled toward the narrow trail ahead. The canyon walls closed around them, red and tall, twisting like a maze. The air grew thick with dust and the cries of circling hawks. Every step was agony for Taken, but Sarah refused to stop. When he collapsed again, she fell beside him, gasping. "I can't carry you," she panted. "But I ain't leaving you neither." He looked at her, this strange, fierce child, and saw something he hadn't seen in years, defiance born of innocence, courage without hate. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why help Taken?" Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the tin cup again. "'Cause you ain't what they said you are. My pa used to say a man's eyes tell the truth. Yours don't lie." For a long moment neither of them spoke. Only the wind moved, whispering through the dry grass like an old spirit. Then Taken reached slowly to the ground, picked up a small handful of dirt, and let it fall through his fingers. "You, little spirit," he said softly. "Brave like hawk." Sarah smiled faintly. "A hawk, huh? I like that better than rattler." By noon they reached the mouth of Devil's Canyon, a deep gash in the land filled with twisted stone and black shadow. Taken pointed toward it with what strength he had left. "Hide there. No horse can follow easy." She helped him inside, climbing between rocks sharp enough to tear her boots. The canyon walls rose high above, cutting out the sun until the world turned cool and dim. Somewhere far below, water dripped in a slow, echoing rhythm. They found a hollow beneath a jutting slab of rock, hidden from view. Sarah settled him there and built a small fire with dry mesquite twigs. Her hands were scraped raw, but she didn't care. She moved like she'd done this before, like frontier girls had to learn or die trying. Taken watched her quietly, the firelight flickering across his face. In the glow, the harsh lines of a warrior softened, revealing the man underneath, tired, human, scarred. When she brought him a few cactus fruits she'd cut open with her knife, he blinked in surprise. "You, a hunter?" he asked. She shrugged. "Just learn not to starve." He smiled, a faint, crooked thing, and nodded. "Good. You live long." Outside the canyon, thunder rolled again, not from the sky but from the sound of hooves. Boone and his men were coming. At the mouth of the canyon, Eli Boone reined his horse and spat into the dirt. "Tracks go in there," he growled. "You reckon the brats help in him?" "Looks that way," said one of his men. "Ain't no sense to it. Why would a white girl save a Comanche?" Boone's grin was thin and cold. Don't matter. She'll wish she hadn't. The gang rode forward, the canyon swallowing them one by one, their shadows stretching long against the walls. Inside, Sarah and Takin sat close to the dying fire. She looked up at the dark sky through the slit of rock above them. I ain't scared, she said even though her voice shook. Takin turned his head slightly toward her. Fear is not shame. Fear tells heart to fight. She blinked, meeting his gaze. You sure got a strange way of talking, da. He nodded once, solemnly. So do you. Despite the danger, Sarah laughed, a small, tired laugh that echoed softly off the stone. For the first time since her father's death, it didn't hurt to smile. But the sound of boots and horses drew nearer, bouncing off the canyon walls. Takin's eyes sharpened. Go, he said. Hide. I'm not leaving you, she whispered. He stared at her for a long moment, something ancient and fierce in his expression. Then he nodded. Then we fight. Outside, lightning cracked across the canyon rim, turning the rocks white for an instant. The storm was coming and with it, Boone's wrath. The hunter and the hunted had switched places. And at the heart of it all, a little girl, armed with nothing but courage, had become the only shield between a dying warrior and the men who wanted him dead. The storm broke just after noon. Thunder rolled like cannon fire across the cliffs, and sheets of rain turned the canyon floor into a slick, red river. The smell of wet dust and mesquite filled the air, and lightning flashed against the stone walls, splitting the sky into white fire. Sarah clung to a rock ledge, water soaking her hair flat to her face. Beside her, Takin moved like a shadow, silent despite the wounds reopening on his shoulder and thigh. He carried himself with grim determination, every step a battle between strength and pain. Behind them, the echoes of hooves grew louder. Boone's men had entered the canyon, their curses swallowed by the roar of thunder. They're close, Sarah whispered. Takin nodded once, jaw tight. Yes. Like wolves. The two pressed forward through the twisting gorge, rainwater rushing around their ankles. At one bend, they found a narrow ledge that climbed toward a shelf of rock high above. The only way out. Sarah looked up, eyes wide. You can't climb that. You're hurt. Takin gripped the rock, breathing hard. You go first. I follow. Sarah shook her head. Not leaving you. But his look silenced her, stern yet gentle, the kind that brooked no argument. Little hawk, he said softly, using the name he'd given her, wind must move before storm breaks. Go. Reluctantly she began climbing. Her boots slipped, hands raw against the stone, but she didn't stop. The rain beat against her back as she scrambled higher. When she reached the ledge, she turned and saw Takin below, dragging himself up despite the pain. Below him, gunfire cracked. Sparks lit the canyon wall. A bullet ricocheted off the rock near Sarah's foot. Keep going, she shouted, voice swallowed by thunder. Boone's voice echoed from below, hard and cruel. You can't hide from me, girl. Hand him over, and I might let you live. Sarah's eyes burned. You'll have to come take him, she yelled back, her voice breaking. Takin reached the ledge, panting, his body trembling with exhaustion. He crouched beside her, grabbed a loose stone and hurled it down. It smashed near Boone's horse, sending the animal rearing. For a moment, chaos erupted below. Come, he said, grabbing her hand. Now. They scrambled deeper into the maze of cliffs. The rain slowed, leaving a mist that curled like smoke through the cracks. Every sound seemed alive, the clink of a pebble, the creak of leather, the echo of distant hooves. They moved through the labyrinth for what felt like hours until the walls opened to a wider space, a dry plateau halfway up the canyon. From there, the land stretched out in folds of stone and shadow. Takin sank to his knees, breathing hard. His leg was bleeding again. Sarah knelt beside him, tearing another strip from her dress to press against the wound. Her small hands worked quickly, steady now despite the fear. He watched her in silence for a long time, rainwater glistening on his face. You brave, he said finally. Not many hearts like yours. Sarah kept her head down, focused on the bandage. I just don't like seeing folks hurt. Pa used to say we all got the same kind of blood, no matter what color our skin is. Takin's gaze softened. Your father, wise man. She swallowed hard. He's gone. Killed in a raid. They said Comanche did it. He looked away, his jaw tightening. The wind moaned through the rocks, and the truth hung heavy between them, a truth neither wanted to name. At last he spoke, voice low. Not all who wear feathers take honor in the wind. Bad men in every tribe, white or red. Sarah nodded slowly. I believe that. As the day wore on, the rain faded to a fine drizzle. They made camp under a shallow cave near the canyon rim. Sarah built another small fire, careful to shield the smoke with stones. The flames flickered against the damp walls, painting them in gold and shadow. Takin lay back, exhaustion overtaking him. His breathing eased, steady and deep. Sarah sat nearby, hugging her knees, staring at the rain outside. For a while neither spoke. The only sound was the crackle of fire and the whisper of wind through the canyon. Then, softly, Takin began to hum, a low, haunting tune that echoed like the call of distant plains. It wasn't words, just sound, deep, mournful and somehow comforting. Sarah's eyes lifted. What song is that? He opened one eye, faint smile playing on his lips. For those who walk the sky. Song to guide spirits home. She frowned. You think you're dying? He didn't answer at first. Then he said quietly, every man dies, little hawk. But not every man finds reason to fight again before he does. Sarah looked into the fire, her small voice steady. Then you can't die yet. 'Cause I didn't climb down that mountain just to drag a dead man back up. For a long moment, silence, then Takin laughed, rough and soft, like thunder fading far away. It was the first time she'd heard him laugh, and it filled the cave with something that felt like hope. Far below, Boone and his men reached the canyon's lower trail, soaked and furious. They found a trail of footprints leading into the high cliffs and knew they were close. Boone's eyes narrowed under the brim of his wet hat. They're slowing down, he muttered. He's bleeding out. The girl's running out of places to hide. He mounted his horse again, the rain dripping from his coat. Come daybreak, he said coldly, we'll have 'em both. But up in the canyon hollow, Sarah lay beside the dying fire, her head resting near Takin's arm. The rain had stopped. A single star broke through the clouds, faint but steady. The little girl who had once believed all Comanche were monsters now slept beside one, and for the first time since her father's death, she wasn't afraid. Outside, the wind moved through the cliffs like a sigh. The storm had passed, but the chase had only just begun. Morning came slow and pale, painting the canyon walls in bruised colors of rose and ash. Mist hung low, wrapping the cliffs like ghostly fingers. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered in every drop of water that fell from the rocks. Sarah woke to the soft crackle of dying embers. The fire had burned low during the night, its warmth fading. She blinked, then turned toward Takin. He was still asleep or close to it, chest rising shallow, his skin gray beneath the bronze. The bandage she'd tied around his leg was soaked through again, dark with blood. Takin, she whispered, shaking his shoulder gently. Hey, you gotta wake up. His eyes fluttered open, dark and unfocused. He tried to sit up but winced sharply. Sarah bit her lip. You're losing too much blood. He managed a faint smile. You worry too much, little hawk. You talk too much for a man who's half dead, she shot back, voice trembling. He chuckled, weak but warm, and that small sound gave her courage. She tore another strip from her petticoat, the dress was little more than tatters now, and pressed it against his leg. Outside the sky lightened. The sound of distant hooves drifted up the canyon. Her head snapped up. They found us. Takin's jaw clenched. He pushed himself upright, fighting the dizziness. We go. But. He looked at her and that was enough. The time for arguing was gone. They moved along the upper ridge, keeping low. The world below was silent except for the cry of a hawk circling overhead. From their height, Sarah could see Boone's men, 6 riders, snaking through the canyon floor like ants. Her stomach turned. They're splitting up. Takin nodded. They know we climb. They will follow blood. Sarah's gaze fell to the trail behind them, the drops of red soaking into the sand, marking every step. A blood trail. She swallowed hard. Then we'll make him think it leads somewhere else. He looked at her sharply, surprised. What you mean? She crouched, eyes scanning the rocky slope. There's a split up ahead, 2 paths. If I drag some of the bloody rags down the wrong trail, they'll follow it. Takin frowned. Too dangerous. You stay close. Her chin lifted. You can barely walk, Takin. I'll move faster. I can do this. He hesitated, then nodded once. You go. But you come back. Always come back. She gave him a quick, shaky smile. I will. Sarah tore a strip from one of the bloody bandages and began dragging it along the stones, careful to leave smears of red in the dirt. She worked fast, breath sharp in her throat, every sound amplified, the clink of gravel, the creak of her wet boots. When she reached the fork in the trail, she kept dragging the blood toward the left path, the one that led deeper into the maze of cliffs. Then she tossed the rag into a puddle to make the mark heavier and ran back the other way, heart hammering. Her feet slipped on the slick rock. A pebble clattered down the slope, echoing far too loud. She froze, and that's when she heard it. A horse's snort. The jingle of a spur. Boone's voice rough and close. "She's up here. I can smell the smoke." Sarah's blood went cold. She ducked behind a cluster of boulders, pressing herself flat. Her heart thudded so hard she thought it would give her away. The riders appeared, 3 of them. Boone led, rifle resting across his saddle. His eyes scanned the rocks, hard and calculating. He spotted the trail of blood and grinned. Well, he muttered. "Looks like our Injun's bleedin' himself into a grave." They turned their horses down the left path, following Sarah's false trail. Only when the sound of hooves faded did she breathe again. She ran back to Takin, lungs burning. They took it. They followed the wrong path. He smiled faintly. Clever hawk. But before she could answer, a gunshot cracked from somewhere behind them, followed by another. They spun around. Down the ridge 2 more riders appeared, not fooled by her trick. One lifted his rifle, firing again. The bullet struck the rock inches from Sarah's head. "Go!" Takin barked. They scrambled uphill, the slope steep and crumbling beneath their feet. Sarah's hand gripped his arm, half dragging him, half pulling herself up. Gunfire echoed off the cliffs, sparks flying. At the top, they stumbled into a narrow ravine, a slit in the rock barely wide enough for one person at a time. "This way." Sarah gasped. They slipped inside just as another shot rang out. The bullet tore through Takin's sleeve but missed flesh. He grunted, pressing a hand against the wall for balance. The ravine was tight and twisting, the air cool and damp. Their footsteps splashed in shallow pools as they ran. Finally, the passage widened, opening to a ledge overlooking a sweeping plain. The view took Sarah's breath away. Far below, the desert stretched golden and endless beneath the rising sun. They had made it out of the canyon. Takin sank to one knee, exhaustion overtaking him. Sarah crouched beside him, trembling from head to toe. "We're clear," she whispered, more to convince herself than him. "We made it." He nodded weakly. "For now." Then his body swayed, and before she could catch him he collapsed. "Takin." She caught his head in her lap, her tears falling onto his face. His skin was cold, too pale. No, don't you do this," she choked out. "You promised you'd fight. You said you'd come back." He tried to speak but only managed a whisper. "Need medicine. North, River Camp." His eyes fluttered shut. Sarah pressed her hand to his chest. His heart still beat, faint but steady. She wiped her tears, looked out over the plains and took a deep breath. Then she grabbed his rifle and stood. "All right," she said, her small voice hard as steel. "Then I'll get you there myself." And with that, the little orphan girl lifted the wounded warrior's arm over her shoulders and together, step by step, they began the long walk across the desert toward the river. Behind them, far away in the canyon, Boone's voice rose in fury. The hunt wasn't over. But Sarah had changed. She wasn't just a frightened girl anymore. She was Little Hawk now, and she would fight like one. The desert stretched like a great, burning sea. Sand shimmered beneath a sun too bright to look at, and the air itself seemed to hum with heat. Sarah trudged onward, half carrying, half dragging the Comanche warrior beside her. Takin's arm was slung over her shoulders, heavy as iron. Every step sank into the dust, every breath stung her throat. They had been walking since dawn. By noon, Sarah's boots were torn through at the toes, her lips cracked and bleeding. The canteen they'd taken from Boone's men was nearly empty. But she didn't stop. She kept her eyes on the horizon, where a thin silver line cut across the plain. "Water. The river's close," she murmured. "Just a little farther." Takin didn't answer. His head lolled, his breath shallow. His skin burned with fever. Sarah tightened her grip and pressed on, whispering to him like she might a frightened horse. "You're not dyin', you hear me? Not after all that runnin'." A vulture circled high overhead, its dark shadow sliding across them. She glared up. "Go on, buzzard. He ain't dead yet." By mid-afternoon, the ground began to slope downward. The scent of wet earth reached her before the sound, faint but real, of running water. Sarah stumbled the last few steps and dropped to her knees at the riverbank. The water was cool, clear, alive. She cupped handfuls of it and splashed it over her face, then pressed some to Takin's cracked lips. His lashes fluttered and he murmured something in Comanche, soft, broken. Sarah didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Was a name. She looked at him closely. "You talkin' about your people?" He opened his eyes halfway. North, camp, medicine pouch. You said that before, she said. Where? Past river, white stones, 3 trees. His eyes rolled back, the words fading. Sarah set her jaw. All right, I'll find it. She laid him in the shade of a sycamore tree, covering him with her torn shawl. You stay right here. I'll be back before you can say, stubborn girl. The river twisted through the land like a silver snake. Sarah followed its curve, searching for the white stones Taken had mentioned. The world felt too quiet. Only the chirr of cicadas and the splash of her boots in shallow water filled the silence. Every so often she glanced behind her, half expecting to see Boone's riders. Then she saw it, a low ridge of white limestone, and beyond it, 3 trees growing close together. Her heart leapt. She climbed the ridge and found the remains of a camp, ashes scattered in a circle, a few broken arrow shafts, and a leather pouch tucked under a flat stone. She picked it up carefully. It smelled of sage and smoke. Inside were small bundles of herbs, a carved bone pendant, and a vial of something dark and oily. Medicine, she whispered. Thank the Lord. She turned to hurry back and froze. A rifle cocked behind her. Well now, drawled a voice she'd prayed she'd never hear again. Ain't this a surprise? Boone sat astride his horse, sweat streaking his dust-covered face, rifle leveled at her. 2 of his men flanked him. Sarah's stomach dropped. How'd you? Blood on the rocks, broken twigs, little footprints. Boone smirked. You might fool half my crew, girl, but not me. Where's the Injun? She clenched her fists around the medicine pouch. Ain't tellin' you. Boone dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. You're a brave one, I'll give you that. But you're runnin' with the wrong kind. That savage is worth $100 to me, dead or alive. He stepped closer. Now hand it over. Sarah's heart pounded. She took 1 small step back, toward the edge of the ridge. The river glistened below, 10 feet down. Boone's eyes narrowed. Don't do it, girl. She held the pouch tight to her chest. You'll have to shoot me first. And before he could raise his rifle, she jumped. The fall knocked the breath from her lungs. The river swallowed her whole, cold and fierce. She fought to the surface, gasping. The current tugged her downstream, but she kicked hard, clutching the medicine pouch to her chest. Boone's curses echoed from the ridge above, followed by the distant crack of a rifle. Bullets hissed through the water, but she didn't stop. She swam, half blind, until the river bent and the canyon walls hid her from view. When she finally crawled onto the bank, she was shivering, soaked and scraped raw, but alive. The medicine pouch was still in her hands. By the time Sarah staggered back to where she'd left Taken, the sun was setting. The sky burned orange and violet, the air cooling fast. She dropped to her knees beside him. His breathing was faint, his face gray. Hey, she whispered, shaking him gently. I got it. I found your medicine. She opened the pouch and copied what she'd seen healers do in town, crushing herbs, mixing them with river water, pressing the paste against his wound. Then she held the vial up to her nose and winced. It smelled foul, but she tipped a few drops between his lips anyway. For a long time nothing happened. Then Taken's breath deepened. His fingers twitched. His eyes opened, clearer than before. You came back, he murmured. Told you I would. He smiled faintly, eyes glistening. You are brave like hawk. Foolish, but brave. Sarah laughed, half sobbing. Guess that makes us even. Above them, the stars blinked awake, one by one. The danger wasn't gone. Boone would come again, but for the first time, Sarah felt something stronger than fear stirring in her chest. Hope. As the night wind swept across the river, she looked at the warrior resting beside her and whispered, I ain't leaving you, Taken. Not till you can walk again. And he, drifting into healing sleep, whispered back. Then we walked together. The fire burned low and steady beneath the stars. It was the kind of flame that didn't just give light, it gave soul. Sarah sat close to it, her knees drawn up beneath her chin, her face aglow with its flicker. Taken lay on the other side, his wound wrapped tight with clean bandages made from her ruined petticoat. The herbs she'd used had worked a kind of miracle. His fever had broken, and his breathing had steadied. For the first time since she'd found him, he slept without pain. The night around them was wide and still, the kind of still that only came after long danger, when the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. The river whispered nearby, silver under the moon. A coyote sang from far away. Sarah leaned back against a log and let the exhaustion take her. She didn't remember closing her eyes. When she woke, the fire had dimmed to embers and dawn was just a pale ghost behind the hills. Taken was awake, sitting upright. Smoke from the fire curled through his long black hair as he turned a small carved feather in his hand, a charm she hadn't noticed before. "You're up," she said softly. "How you feelin'?" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw the strength return to his eyes, that same fierce spark that had frightened her the night she found him. But now it didn't scare her. "I am alive," he said simply. "Because of you." Sarah shrugged. "You'd have done the same for me." He gave a quiet smile. "Maybe. But few have done such for me before." She hesitated, then asked, "You said before you were a leader. Is that true?" He nodded slowly. "I am talking of the Nakoni. My father was chief before me. We keep the northern plains where the buffalo still run. But white men came with guns. Soldiers burned our camps, took our people." His gaze darkened, far away. "They said I led the raids on their forts. They called me outlaw murderer. The bounty men came, Boone and his pack of jackals." Sarah listened, silent, the weight of his words pressing against her chest. "That's why they tied you up," she whispered. "They meant to sell you dead." He nodded. "They thought I was worth more that way." She stared into the fire, jaw tight. "Ain't right. None of it." He watched her for a moment, then reached into the ashes and pulled out a glowing stick. He planted it upright, the flame catching again, steady and bright. "In my people," he said softly, "we call this the spirit fire. When two souls share danger and both live, they sit by it and speak truth. No lies, no shame." Sarah blinked. "Truth?" He nodded. "Yes. You told me my story. Now tell me yours." Her breath hitched. She looked away. "Ain't much to tell." "Tell it," he said gently. She stared into the flames, her voice small. "My ma died when I was little. My pa was a farmer till the drought came. Then he drank what little money we had. One night he just didn't come back." Her hands twisted in her lap. "After that, I worked for whoever'd feed me. Mostly folks who didn't care if a girl slept in the barn. Guess I got used to being alone." She forced a small laugh. "Then I found you tied up like a scarecrow, and somehow I got myself into more trouble than I ever imagined." Takin smiled faintly. "You are not alone now." Her eyes lifted to his, steady, dark, and full of quiet truth. Something warm and unfamiliar flickered in her chest. She looked away quickly. "You talk pretty big for a man who still can't walk proper." He chuckled, flexing his legs slightly. "I will walk. And then we must leave this place." "Boone?" He nodded. "He will not stop. He will hunt me until one of us dies." Sarah swallowed hard. "Then he'll have to get through me first." Takin's expression softened. "You are small, little hawk, but your heart is large. Still, I would not see it broken." He took the carved feather charm from his hand and held it out to her. "When you are afraid, hold this. It carries the spirit of my people, and my promise." She took it, tracing its smooth edge with trembling fingers. "What promise?" "That I will protect you as you protected me. No matter the cost." For a long time they sat in silence, the fire between them burning brighter, the kind of flame that didn't just warm the skin but something deeper. Then, faintly from far across the river valley, came the echo of a gunshot. Sarah froze. Takin's eyes hardened. "He has found our trail again." The brief peace between them vanished like smoke. He reached for his rifle, testing his strength. His movements were slow but steady. "We fight?" she asked. He looked at her, and the faintest smile curved his lips. "No," he said. "We hunt." As the sun rose over the plains, the Comanche leader and the little girl began to move, silent shadows against the wild horizon. The spirit fire still burned behind them, a small ember in the sand, marking the moment when two lost souls became bound by fate. Ahead lay the final reckoning, and the blood debt that could only be paid in lead and courage. Dawn bled crimson across the cliffs of Red Mesa. Wind rolled through the canyons like the breath of a drumbeat, carrying dust and the smell of gunpowder. Sarah and Takin crouched among the rocks, watching the horizon burn awake. Below, Boone and his riders wound their way up the narrow pass, 6 men on sweating horses, rifles gleaming in the light. "They found us," Sarah whispered. Takin's gaze never left the riders. "Good. The hawk does not run forever." He moved with a calm she'd never seen before, tying strips of cloth around the barrel of his rifle to silence the click of metal, checking the edge of his knife. The fever had left him, replaced by something cold and certain. Sarah's fingers closed around the carved feather he'd given her. Her heart beat fast, but she didn't tremble. "Tell me what to do." He looked at her, this small dirt-smeared child who dragged a dying warrior across half of Texas, and nodded once. You take the high rock. When they pass beneath, roll the stones. I will draw their eyes. She swallowed hard. And Boone? Takin's voice was low. He is mine. The riders climbed higher. Dust plumed behind them, horses snorting. Boone rode at the front, his long coat flapping, eyes sharp as knives. He raised his hand to halt the group. He's close. I can smell the smoke from his fire. That was when the first boulder thundered down. Sarah shoved with all her might, the rock tearing loose and crashing onto the trail below. 2 horses reared and fell, men shouting. Takin stepped from behind a ridge and fired once, clean. 1 rider dropped. Another bullet sang off the stone near Boone's shoulder. Spread out. Boone roared. He's up there. Gunfire exploded across the canyon. Dust filled the air. Sarah ducked low, heart hammering, loading the rifle Takin had given her. She aimed, not to kill, just to protect, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil knocked her backward, but the shot found its mark, sending another bounty hunter sprawling. Boone cursed, firing wildly toward the cliffs. Takin, he bellowed. You should have stayed dead when I found you. Takin's voice echoed back, calm and deep. You talk too much, Boone. He appeared on the edge of the mesa, wind whipping his hair, rifle steady. For a heartbeat, the 2 men stared across the distance. Predator and prey, though it was hard to tell which was which. Then both fired. Boone's shot grazed Takin's arm. Takin's bullet ripped Boone's hat clean off and sent him stumbling. The others hesitated, long enough for Sarah to push another boulder free. It crashed into the remaining horses, scattering them. The canyon filled with chaos, shouts, gunfire, dust. Boone scrambled up the slope, teeth bared, revolver drawn. Sarah saw him coming and tried to reload, but her hands shook too hard. He reached her before she could aim. You, he spat, grabbing her by the arm. You little brat, you cost me everything. She kicked him hard in the shin. He snarled and raised the pistol. Then Takin was there. He moved like lightning, tackling Boone into the dust. The 2 men rolled, fists and steel flashing. Boone swung a knife. Takin caught his wrist, twisting. The blade clattered away. Boone drove an elbow into his wound. Takin grunted, staggered, but didn't fall. He grabbed Boone by the collar, eyes burning like storm fire. For my people, he said. For the girl. And with a final strike he sent Boone tumbling backward, off the edge of Red Mesa. The man's scream echoed once, then was gone. Silence returned. Wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the last curls of gun smoke away. Sarah stood frozen, staring at the place where Boone had fallen. Her small hands still clutched the rifle. Takin limped toward her, breathing hard, blood seeping through his sleeve. You did well, little hawk, he said softly. The hunt is done. She looked up at him, tears bright in her eyes. It's really over? He nodded. For now. The earth will remember. They buried Boone beneath a cairn of stones at the mesa's edge, silent except for the cry of a hawk circling overhead. Then they turned north toward the open plains. Days later, the land softened into grass and wildflowers. Smoke rose from a distant valley, Comanche fires flickering like stars on the ground. Takin slowed. My people, he said. Home. Sarah looked up at him, unsure. What about me? He smiled gently. The wind will decide. But wherever you go, the hawk flies beside you. She smiled back through her tears. Guess I got a tribe now, huh? He placed a hand on her shoulder. You always did. Together they walked down into the valley, the sun behind them turning the plains gold. The story of the wounded warrior and the little orphan girl would travel far, told in campfires and saloons, in whispers and songs, about the day a child's courage saved a Comanche chief, and how the desert itself bore witness to their bond.